Hello and welcome to another episode of the Practice Forward podcast. I'm your host, Owen Bush. Today we're joined by Adam McCullough. He is an architectural designer whose work bridges architecture, furniture, and education through a practice rooted in material sensitivity and spatial storytelling. At Ark and Type, where he's a principal architect, he's helped shape projects like Blue Table Chocolates and Fawn and Fox Salon, spaces that turn modest materials and constraints into rich architectural atmospheres. And then through his own studio, MCC Design, Adam explores small-scale furniture and reclaimed material strategies that echo his architectural ethos. He's also an educator at the University of Buffalo School of Architecture and Planning, where he leads some undergraduate design studios, emphasizing craft and sustainability and design as a process of discovery. Across disciplines and scales, Adam's work reflects a constant belief architecture is an act of care, crafted through constraint, guided by clarity, and grounded in place. So we're happy to welcome Adam. How you doing, Adam? Thanks for joining us.
I'm well. Quick correction, I'm not a principal architect at Ark and Type. Just an architectural designer, but just
understood. I'm sorry.
No apology necessary.
And today, our podcast is brought to us by Scandaplan. We're the measure of excellence for architects and engineers. At Scandaplan, precision isn't just a promise, it's practice with industry-leading standards and level of detail and accuracy. Scandaplan delivers tailored as-built documentation that integrates seamlessly into your workflow. Whether you're working on adaptive reuse or high-stakes renovations, our deliverables are built for confidence and we're ready when you are. So we empower visionaries like Adam to do what they do best, which is their design, with deep commitment to sustainability, collaboration, and cultural stewardship. And it helps teams preserve what matters and shape what's next. Scandaplan, certainty lies in good data. All right, Adam, so let's get into it here.
Sounds good.
How you doing today? So you're joining us from Buffalo, New York, which I love so much. It's where my dad is from, so I spent a lot of time there. And I've been up. I did host a AIA thing up there, and got to know some of the architects. And really amazing. Of a lot of really interesting firms in Buffalo.
Yeah, for sure. We're lucky to have a lot of great firms, both that have been around for decades and some that are just starting in the last few years. So it's a nice place to be right now.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know about, there's so many incredible, rich architectural and design traditions from Buffalo. We were just talking about. I have here a vase from the Roycrofters Arts and Crafts movement. Can you tell me a little, just for a second, just tell me a bit about what is so special about Buffalo architecturally.
I was just at the AKG, the Albright Knox. I always forget what the G stands for. It's the new donor
gallery.
Sorry. So it's Gundlach. That's what it is, Gundlach. And I think and thinking about the AKG, it really signifies how Buffalo has been pretty strong architecturally through a bunch of phases of design. I mean, the original building, beautiful neoclassical, the Bunshaft addition, great example of mid-century architecture, specifically, with its attention to not only minimalist detail, but it's really great sensitivity to the original building, and of course the new addition, which is done by SRM.
Just for our listeners, the Albright Knox is kind of like the Metropolitan Museum of Buffalo.
Yeah.
It's in a gorgeous park that was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. So it's really part of it's kind of the jewel of the landscape of the park, of the big park in Buffalo, right? So
yeah, and I mean, bringing up Olmsted, which anyone in Buffalo knows, I mean, the Olmsted Park system was meant to traverse the entire city. So, I mean, there's a heritage of architectural and landscape design that, it shares some DNA with the other, sort of landmark American cities, New York, Boston, and there's beautiful architecture in the city designed by the likes of, the Saarinen, who, if you don't know the name, you know their work because you know the St. Louis Arch, for example, and Kleinen's Music Hall is renowned the world over, not only as a beautiful building, but a great place to play music. So, I mean, Buffalo is filled with great architecture, and like I say, it's a great place to be, to study architecture and to do architecture right now, because there's just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, I live in Troy, New York. We have all this incredible Gilded Age architecture, and they even shoot the TV series, The Gilded Age, right down the street from me here. Oh. But because it does sort of look like that 19th century New York. But Buffalo is, I see all those same kind of hallmarks in these older buildings in Buffalo, but they're so much bigger and more grand because you have large boulevards there. And it is, as you said, kind of, the city planning is very spread out with all the parks and
obviously that comes with challenges. There's some of the neighborhoods are a little bit disparate from one another. When you're in a place like Manhattan, there's nowhere that you walk that doesn't have a bodega or a bookstore or somewhere to be. In Buffalo, between Hurdle Village and Hurdle Ave and Elmwood Village, it's not really like a walk, it's more of a drive. So there's definitely challenges that come with the city, but they're challenges that I think creative minds are going to be able to overcome. And we're going to figure out how to make the city a little bit more, interconnected.
I mean, listen, I think it was originally designed as a somewhat of a sprawling city, but now it's, over the past 50 years or whatever, it's become extremely sprawling, where it's almost like you're talking about LA or Phoenix, or like one of these giant sprawling complexes where, you guys might both live in the same region, but you're like 45 minutes, an hour drive away from each other.
It is. There is a bit of that, suburban creep there. So
So, all right. Well, anyway, always interested in, learning more about that area. And so I was really interested to see the kind of work that you're doing at Ark and Type, because it's very, it's kind of the opposite of this stodgy historic type architecture. It's very, it's very new. It's very contemporary, and it's interesting to see this kind of like parametric architecture and other kinds of things like popping up in the landscape there in Buffalo. So we wanted to talk about two different projects that you've been working on there. The first one was it's called Blue Table Chocolates. So this firm is called Ark and Type, so with an ampersand. And one of these projects is Blue Table Chocolates, which has this. Well, why don't you explain it?
Yeah, I mean, the project began with a repeat client, Ben Johnson, who came to us, and he needed more space. His original space, which was designed by Seth, who is the principal designer, architect at Ark and Type, years ago, designed their first space in the 5 Points area in Buffalo. So they were moving to Larkinville, and so we had to fit them in roughly 900 square feet, if memory serves. And so we needed a back of house area, kitchen that was essentially an exhibition kitchen, so that the customers could see the chocolate being made, and the retail portion, which was, meant to show off the chocolate, not so much like just a normal consumable good, but like the art that it is. Ben and his team create amazing truffles and chocolate bars and like sculptural chocolate pieces. So we wanted to treat his art like art. So that.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah. I mean, that began in a lot of ways thinking about, well, how do we present it? How is it held? And originally the idea that ceiling, which if anyone goes to our website or Instagram or anything and sees the ceiling, that was not even in the project originally.
Really?
Originally the idea was actually that the ceiling was going to be a continuous mirrored surface from the retail all the way through the
Wow.
exhibition kitchen. And for a number of reasons.
Let me just describe this before you go ahead. So the ceiling of this, it's almost as if you're entering into some kind of chocolate river, like some swirling, gooey chocolate. It's like an upside down chocolate river is, I guess, how I would describe it on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Right? But it's also it's a natural tone, and it kind of fits the overall kind of wood, almost kind of like finish kind of design that I see in the store. The rest of the store is very clean, geometric, rectilinear, and then it has this very crazy swooping gooey chocolate rooftop.
And so
ceiling.
And the reason that came about is essentially because pretty late in the process we running into, as many projects, value engineering, and in addition to that, some concerns from the clients, the kind of weird nature of, like, if it was a mirrored ceiling, having people looking up and down at you in a way is a valid concern. So given both of those issues with the cost of the mirrored ceiling and the privacy concern, in a way, if you want to say, we shifted gears and we went back to the original image, which was sent to us by the client, which was an image of untempered chocolate. And it was the same exact way that you just described the ceiling. It was, flowing, gooey chocolate in the image.
Yeah.
And so the idea, we approached actually one of Seth's former students, Marielle Hershoff, who helped us with the parametric design, and we worked through a series of stages to sort of get it to feel the way that we want it to feel, right?
Right.
Because parametrics is a tool. It's not just, you don't just like do it and it designs it for you. You have to understand the tool. And thankfully, Mariella understood it. She's amazing. And then it was a process of figuring out how to get this to be a reality. And that was, again, working with UB, which Seth and I now are both teaching at. UB has an enormous fabrication workshop, so we were able to CNC mill all of these essentially ceiling tiles. I mean, they're basically ceiling tiles, right? They're just very fancy ceiling tiles. So they're milled and then finished at UB and then installed on site by the contractor. So
it was. It sounds like a really interesting project and an amazing way to leverage all the students and the technology, and really getting your students some real world experience.
A bunch of them too. And they were all they were all fantastic. I had limited contact at that time because I was also building other stuff for the project. And I think that the key lesson for that was, like, when faced with value engineering, don't just cut, but reimagine, you have to, we have to do something differently. We don't have the funds to do X, so let's do Y. and make it just as good. Or in this case, I think a lot of people would agree that it's probably more successful than it would have been if we did the mirror ceiling. So,
well, you won an enormous amount of awards and got a huge recognition for this project. Architizer, I believe, or tell me about some of the different articles and awards you've got.
Yeah, Architizer was a big one, and it was a real honor to get that, given the international nature of it. It also led to publication in a bunch of really great journals. I have somewhere here. I have one in Korean here, and then another in Italian, I believe. So it's like seeing, our work with different languages, and just knowing that it was seen by people all over was really special. And then also being honored locally was nice, was really special as well. Getting together with our colleagues from Western New York and seeing all of their work at the AIA Awards here was really special. So yeah, it was great, and it gave us a lot of encouragement to just continue with the same rigor, and that's what we're doing now. So.
Was there a moment when it had a risk of just becoming too sculptural, or you had to pull it back to maintain the function? The top and the bottom of the space are real contrast with each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in a way, since that ended up being the only sculptural element, there was paring back that happened for sure. I remember one of the earlier iterations of that ceiling was quite extreme, and not that it's not necessarily extreme now, but yeah, it's like, how do you make a statement without overstepping, I guess. And in a way, maybe the sort of simplicity of the ground level helps, right?
Right.
We kept the oak furniture pretty simple. There's pretty, it looks simple, but in a way it's not. Like, even those, there's dishes that come out of the wall, which were fabricated locally as well by a really, really great welder. And those dishes, we had to figure out, well, how do we have these things sort of slip into the wall, the connection point, without seeing it? And thankfully the Buffalo Niagara Weld Works helped us with that, and we got essentially a sleeve that's hidden in the wall. You don't see it, and then even though it's a round bit of metal that comes out of that dish, it's squared off at the end, so it kind of slots in, and it doesn't. It's really, really nice detail that makes the space better. Like, those moments that go unnoticed, in a way,
sure,
help the entire experience, right? So by keeping it so, in a way, austere down at the surface, I think it allows the Golden River above to sing a little louder.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about this other project, Fox and Fawn.
Yep.
So this is adaptive reuse, is it not?
Yeah. In the most in a way, from like the most crude of beginnings to to the maybe most poetic of ends.
I'm just looking at these two images on your website,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, the most like heavenly, visionary kind of space to be in, with this enormous oculus on the ceiling, mm-hmm. with exposed structure, and then I'm looking at the exterior. It just looks like the most completely. Is that the actual exterior of the building?
That was so that was the exterior.
I see. Okay, so that's the before shot, right? So it basically just looks like any old warehouse that you would just drive by on the street.
It's essentially a small warehouse, pole barn style thing. It had an apartment in it, if you can believe it. But yeah, so, but it had the space requirements that our client needed. So the question was, how do you turn a warehouse into a salon?
Now I imagine I'm looking at a rendering here, right? Is this completed? Do you have photos of
that's on the website at this moment on June 3rd. That is a rendering. But the space is done in the fact that the client is in the space. There's a few details that are still being finished up, but once those are done, we'll get photography and everything. But you can, if you look at the Ark and Type, I want to say, I don't know if it's on Ark, but on Fawn and Fox's Instagram, it's definitely there. You can see the see the interior, and it is they are loving it, and I love it too.
It's called Fawn and Fox Salon. It's called Fawn and Fox Salon, and it's really, it's actually pretty incredible new kind of typology for adaptive reuse, I would say. Converting these type of warehouses into such an incredible luxurious space, which I would never even imagine I would walk into in Buffalo. I have to tell my family about this place. And it really looks really quite striking. It's like there's a giant 8-foot wide skylight, but it's like there's like multiple skylights, right? It really does look like an Oculus in that it feels like an eye with a
There's a single 8-foot circular skylight, and then below that, so that's on the original roof, which is a gable, and then below that, of course, are trusses. And part of that design really was, how do we introduce light and maintain the structure? And I have to say, the folks who did the construction for the drywall on that just did an excellent job. The craft is extraordinary. So the way that the drywall from the Oculus meets the existing trusses is seamless. It just envelops it in such a perfect way. And then, of course, below the trusses is the Oculus, which opens up to show the entire structure above of the existing warehouse. And of course, letting the light into the salon itself. So it's a really, it came with its challenges. The project is essentially, 50 to 80% radiuses. So it took a lot of framing. Our client's husband, JP, great. He ended up doing a lot of the framing for this project. And he did an excellent job. And it's one of those situations where you never expect a certain, let's say, biographical piece to help. But he, growing up, was a skateboarder. Maybe he still is. I don't know. But and you would think, well, why does that help someone know how to frame radiuses? Well, if you've ever seen a skate ramp, you see the half pipe ramps, or if you build ramps coming up, you know how to build a radius. He just did an amazing job with the framing, and because of his amazing job, the drywallers, they did. It's perfect. Those radiuses are perfectly smooth. Back to another case of sort of value engineering. We intended that this was going to have a very textured paint surface on this. Think of the Japanese sand gardens, how the rake creates the grooves in the sand, or maybe ripples on the beach. That was how the entire wall surface was supposed to look, and you can see it in that rendering that's still on the website. But and part of the reason that we wanted it to be heavily textured was, what if these radiuses aren't perfect, and then we have this downlight coming on the surface and you see the imperfections? Well, let's hide that with intentional imperfection. And then doing a textured surface like that is time, it's money, and this project was a big project for a salon. We had to nix that, and fortunately the framing was so well done and the drywall was so well done that you can't even, it's seamless. It's just perfect. So,
it's just hard to imagine, because you see this warehouse and it looks like some place where they probably were chopping up cars or, spray painting things. It was probably some kind of like horrible brown site if you look at it, right? And then you look at this new space and it looks like Wonder Woman's hangout. I mean, it's definitely a goddess space, and it's great for all the goddesses of Buffalo. Thank you for bringing that there. So transporting. I mean, I got to see it. I got to see it with my own eyes.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. By the way, is it gender neutral salon? So they'll do all hair there. So yeah, go get your hair done. I can't.
Sure. Well, I mean, gods and goddesses. I mean, it definitely. I think I would feel quite godlike if I had my haircut there.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I mean, we weren't expecting the initial responses from their clients to be as, they've been so vocal so far, just saying, and apparently some people have been moved to tears, which is, I mean, I was surprised and in a way humbled by that. And other people have used the word, ethereal, heavenly, and things like this.
Yeah.
And, that's what we're going for. But, usually, oftentimes as architects or designers, we put words to our work. And, in a way, you're putting words in people's heads. It's like, Inception, you remember that. And,
sure.
But it's nice when unprompted, people use the words that we were floating around in the design process, right? So, that doesn't always happen, but the fact that it's happened with this so far has been very rewarding.
Right.
And that it's about what used to be a warehouse.
Right. So you called your work an economy of means and density of meaning. So can you explain maybe with either one of these two projects how that might be applicable here?
Yeah, actually, I think both of these projects speak to that. We have to use the resources that are available to us. This is always the case. We don't have, at least right now, we don't have these enormous clients that can snap their fingers and make anything happen. And that doesn't mean that we treat our clients differently. And for that, and it's not even just the clients, it's about the surrounding community. It's about all of the end users. Sure. And then it's about, what spaces could be after people move on, of course. So, like we talked about with the chocolate shop, using resources. It's like, okay, bid comes in for, X, table, right? The titular blue table, I guess. Oh, actually, the reason it's called blue table chocolates isn't because of the current table. Anyway, digress. But the table in the kitchen space, the price tag came back way too high. So what do? Do we get rid of it? We just buy them some off the rack stuff. In this case, what we did is we said, well, I like to make stuff. Seth, his dad likes to make stuff. So we ended up taking all of the millwork and we did it ourselves. This is not typical. Not all offices would be able to take on this sort of,
sure,
thing. But we did. So my dad's shop is around the corner from where I live. Seth's dad's shop is down in East Aurora. So in two separate shops, we made all of the millwork, from the big table in the kitchen to the millwork up front, just below where the chocolate is on sale. So, so I think that's what it means, is being creative with what your means are. Right.
Right.
And then saying, okay, we're going to have to be a little creative with how this is contracted. We're going to have to be a little creative with how we source, X material. Right. And then for the salon, I mean, is the same thing. You know, it's a salon with I think around eight stylists, right? This isn't a huge chain. And actually, let's be honest, the big chains are usually the worst places to get your hair done. But you know, I mean, so how do we do this in a way that is beautiful, that does get the client what they need in terms of function, and that doesn't, you know, just default, I suppose, to standard procedure. Let's put it that way. And then I think by doing that, by approaching means in that way, meaning comes out. You know, we talked, and I think the way that even you've been describing both of these projects, both of those descriptions are, I think, a testament to the result of meaning in the project, right? At least that's how I view it. So, you know, and everybody, I guess, gleans meaning in different ways, from architecture or just landscape. And but as you said, you know, ethereal, heavenly for the salon, I think is a great meaning. And then also just the I think sustained meaning over time of the memories and things that are produced in these spaces, right?
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about your work at the University of Buffalo. So you're also a professor and you're also a designer. So hopefully we have a chance to talk about all these things. But so, you know, I also collaborate quite a bit with the School of Architecture here at Rensselaer. And we've been doing a lot of, you know, helping them out, delivering point clouds and models for their studio so they can focus on adaptive reuse, historic preservation type projects. I actually did a project recently at University of Buffalo. We did about a 250,000 square foot scope for a new campus they're redeveloping. So you're teaching undergraduates studios, right? And it's really about the design practice. So seems like your studios focus on sustainability and spatial clarity. What's the first exercise you teach to give students to kind of like unlearn like conventional building logic?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way that architecture studios are set up, for anyone who doesn't know, is, you know, you have an entire class of students, which, you know, can be anywhere from, you know, this last year there were like 130 students just in the first year class, right? So this is going to be split into sections. The entire group will learn essentially the same syllabus, and then each instructor sort of approaches their studio with some freedom, but obviously making sure that the you know, deliverables are met and things like that. So as for your question about, like, in a way unlearning, I guess maybe what intuitively someone would think in terms of spatial design, you know, I've been really impressed with the work I've seen from the first semester students. I actually haven't taught the first semester, but the way that it's set up with this sort of, it's funny that at least this last year, the freedom of the project, and in a way this abstract nature of the project that it was last fall, which was this, it was called the fifth room. And the idea was by the end of the semester they would design I would maybe call it a pavilion. Some students veered more into, like, you know, proper building territory, and there were 4 rooms, but the 5th room doesn't need to be, strictly speaking, a room, right? And I think
what are some examples of that?
I think, like, you know, so this might, one way is that the 5th room is created by, say, a shadow cast by a wall that's only there at X time of day or X time of year, and that because of like the orientation of the shadow, it kind of creates a spatial condition that isn't, like I said, strictly speaking, a room, but it sort of what am I trying to say, augments the experience such that it has a spatial quality to it, right? Okay. So by doing
every student
that,
can interpret this on their own, right?
Yeah, and I saw a lot of interpretations last December. So yeah, and some of them were just lovely. I mean, the way that they.
What are some other good examples of this?
Oh man, it's going to be a minute. Because the only way that I saw these was for a couple hours when I was reviewing, so so my memory is not going to be too good.
Sure, yeah.
But okay. I mean, but I think that hopefully people can kind of get the idea that through this prompt, students are able to rethink how they think about space and buildings, right?
Sure.
And the irony is that then the studio that I taught in the spring, which immediately follows that, is designed by Steph Kramer, who's the coordinator of the studio, and she's been doing the studio. I think this was the 7th year that this specific 102 studio has been done, and each time it changes a bit, but the core principles are still there. And it's funny that they go from a semester that is incredibly free and open, and then they go to a semester that is full of rules, right? So this last semester, there's a lot of operative rules for how they can design with certain materials. And basically the goal of the semester, the primary goal, is that they, in a group of 3 to 5 students, will design a wall system out of things like timber, light timber, plywood, steel plate, steel tube, or concrete, right? These are the main materials that they get to use. And by using specific rule sets for each of these materials, and then selecting 2, blah, 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 they design a wall to an end. And that end is usually very poetic, but the sort of paradox of it is that despite all of these rules, there is still a great amount of freedom. And once you understand the rule set, so
they're kind of forcing them to be creative and lyrical within a lot of very tight constraints.
The word lyrical helps because, I've always thought of design as like, we maybe in high school or college, we all had to write a sonnet, right? And in a sonnet, there's very specific rules for, like, depending on if it's like a English or an Italian sonnet, the rhyme structure, the stanzas and all that, right? So we've all had to write a sonnet probably, or at least read one. And usually we do a pretty bad job of it, right? Because we only have a certain grasp on the English language and, a certain grasp on meter and everything. But then you look at someone like John Donne or Shakespeare, right? Then you see, they understand the rules so well that there's a freedom in their use of, and occasionally they're breaking up the rules, right?
Sure.
So, about halfway through the semester, the students, they have such a grasp of this rule set that Steph has developed that they do have this ability to freely design and to do so in a way that creates surprising objects. And the walls do everything from like holding fires to directing rainwater to casting shadow patterns and things like this. So, by the time the exhibition rolls around and all the students build these walls out in the Crosby courtyard, you're seeing, I forget how many, actually, let's see, there were 6 projects, 5 studios, so 30 walls outside of the of the studio building, and people are lighting things on fire, people are pouring water, and it's just amazing what they're able to come up with.
So that's the freshman studios, right? But you teach the sophomore and senior studios?
I've taught sophomore fall, which is so so it probably sounds like, oh geez, when do they do buildings, right? Because
Right.
so sophomore rolls around and they get a proper like building program and everything like that. So and the 2 times that I've taught it, it's been somewhat similar, but the second time it was an artist residency. That was just past fall. And yeah, so there's program embedded into it. There's square footage requirements. There's a site, which is very important. And this past year it was at Art Park. That's what the site was. The year before it was.
So you determine a site for them to design for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they designed for a site.
They're designing a new build? They're designing a new build?
Yeah, in this case, it was new build. You know, I thought about it. The first semester, it was actually on a site that had a building on it, and it was 3 stories. And the students had the option to use the existing building and incorporate it, or just to essentially treat it as demolished and design their own. And every single one of my students treated it as demolished and designed their own. And I was a little disappointed in that, because I think it would have been fun to see.
I would just say Buffalo is such an exciting place to think about adaptive reuse that it just seems like you would really want to be pointing your students in that direction. And mm-hmm. I like I said, I'd be really happy to help you guys in any way I can, mm-hmm. as we do with the School of Architecture here in Rensselaer. You know, mm-hmm. their students are able to start with a point cloud and a model, and then all they really have to do is think about the design and what they want to do. And it's mm-hmm. actually, I found it interesting. So I was involved in this project last semester with rehabbing the guild house of the Cathedral of All Saints, which is a 19th century, really incredible building, but it was really collapsing and totally dilapidated and on the verge of being demolished. And mm-hmm. So they did a studio at RPI, and I think there were 10 or 15 teams that each did redesign pitches. And what I found was interesting was, since it was an actual project, and since we had actual structural engineers working on it and construction managers and those folks, they were able to come to the crits and actually just talk to the students from the real world of actual real construction and actual real structural stability and feasibility of construction, and understanding kind of what things cost to make and what, so then able to actually have those kind of real brass tacks conversations while they were still in the middle of the studio, so that they all were kind of like able to revise their vision a little bit and try to make it a little more feasible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, feasibility is something that, for better or worse, we're usually, at least in my experience, not talking about too much at UB. Then again, there's probably more specific studios, maybe even grad studios that do think about that. But yeah, I mean, modeling existing conditions is an important practice, and whether, and in practice you have, depending on the scale of the project, you either go do it yourself, or, you contract it to someone like yourself to be able to get an accurate model, right? It would be great. It would be a good project for particularly, I think, later semesters for students. Early semesters, it's good to get students to sites and have them do measuring and do discovery. And that's what they did with, like, for example, the art park project from last fall. We all went to the site. They had to, measure where the trees were on the site, measure how far certain walking paths were, and all these things. So they understand, and they come out of it and they realize, wow, I forgot to measure this thing. I'm going to have to either go back or find someone who did measure it, Yeah,
well, I mean, it seems like a lot of these students become very enamored of these parametric modeling tools. And I mean, you guys are actually putting in practice and actually introducing that form of architecture into Buffalo, which is really, amazing. But, at the same time, I feel like, a lot, because, like you said, it's a design school. It's not a trade school. So, you really want people to think about, being designers. But at the same time, I mean, for architects, I think the majority of projects people work on have to do with existing buildings, especially in a city like Buffalo,
Yeah. I mean, the majority of projects I've worked on since 2016 have been existing buildings. So I've done new builds for sure. But almost every building that I work on is existing in some way or another.
Do you guys, do you talk about sustainability in your studios? Is that part of the practice, or?
Yeah, it is in a number of ways too, and at different scales. I think, like for example, in the first year, the 102 studio with the walls I was discussing, like we bake in ideas of sustainability by, like for example, material allocation, right? Like let's say a student's making a wall out of steel and concrete. Well, they should design it to use as much of the material that they're allocated as possible so that they're not wasting. And they all have to make assessments of this through like cut sheets and understanding how much material they designed for, how much material they got, and then how much material they used. And then at the end of the semester, all of these have to be designed such that the material can be reused and recycled. So that's at one scale. At other scales, it's about designing buildings that are, say, different standards of energy efficient, all the way up to, some students I've seen have done the work to design, passive buildings. I've seen the juniors. I mean,
in some ways, just as an outsider coming from this, I just wonder if these practices lead to a bias towards new construction, because sustainability is sort of taught about these new materials, these new builds, and then the tools that people are getting enamored with BIM and Grasshopper and all these things, and then they're thinking about basically being the next Frank Gehry or whatever. But I feel like it's almost the opposite of sustainability, really, because
it can be.
New construction has so many anti-sustainable side effects.
Oh yeah, this is definitely discussed, at least among the faculty that I've talked with. It's but in a way too, I think there's a problem of like slipping into what's the word? There's definitely not so sustainable practices that can be done with existing buildings too. Let's put it that way. Depends on where your priorities are placed.
Are there things about sustainability that are easier to teach than they are to practice, or vice versa?
I mean, yes and no. The good thing about teaching is that in practice, sometimes your goals of sustainability are quashed by budget, right?
Yeah.
Even if we're doing an addition, for example, and we want to put like a more sustainable insulation in like rock wool, and then it comes to construction and we can't afford rock wool, well, then we put in bat. And what's bat? Well, it's not as not as sustainable as rock wool is, right? It's not as sustainably produced.
Yeah.
And this can go in a number of ways. When we do demolition, for example, what's the standard? Take it down, get rid of it. Well, is there a more sustainable way of doing demolition? Can we collect materials that are reusable? And so I think in a way we have to keep our ideal, right? We have to keep that ideal of sustainability for reasons that hopefully we all agree on, right? But sometimes you run into barriers in practice. In school, in a way, you run into the opposite problem. I think you're right. Sometimes students are very excited about their design idea, but they haven't necessarily thought about how that idea interacts with nature. And I think there's multiple ways of thinking about sustainability. There's like, where does the material come from? Where does the material go when it's when you're done with it? There's also, I mean, obviously, energy efficiency, huge. But then, is it a sustainable project and how it interacts with the community around it? Does the way that this building sort of breathes in and out the community, do it in such a way that it wants to last for a long time? Or is it going to be the kind of thing that in 10 years is no longer useful? So, and what you'll find too, at least I'll speak from my personal experience too. You know, when you're a student, some things don't click. And then 5 years later, you think back on something that an instructor said, like I do all the time. And I'm like, oh, that makes way more sense now, you know? Sure. And also it, you know, there is a bit of, I want to say like ego death that has to happen in order for you to make projects that really matter. And that's like that's a very personal thing, you know, to allow yourself as an author to sort of be erased from a project is not a easy thing to do. Everybody wants their name in big bold letters on things, right?
Yeah, of course.
But
well, I mean, I would just imagine like offering all of your students like that completely generic and humble looking warehouse that you guys converted into like a goddess temple, as I said, you know, like maybe that's part of the ego death, you know, like, you know, you're not always going to be, you know, building skyscrapers.
No. And maybe we shouldn't be building skyscrapers. So, you know, yeah. Also, there's something to be said for like, this is where I am, right? This is what, back to your means question, right? This is where I am. This is what I have. How do I do this and make beauty, right?
Yes.
And I say beauty in more than just like the visual sense, but in the communal sense. And, you know, we have 5 senses too. So it's not just about how that's another problem that you run into, by the way, in not just in school, but in practice is oftentimes we're presenting visual things, right? We're showing people drawings and we're talking about them, but these are spaces that envelop all the senses too. So
yes,
I don't know. I mean, and whether or not that has a direct tie-in to something like sustainability, I don't know. I have a feeling that spaces that matter to us in like a emotional sense probably want to last longer. But again, another paradox there is that, you know, we tore down Frank Lloyd Wright's soap factory in Buffalo. So, you know, humans are weird.
Yeah. So, well, let's try to turn that around a little bit, and hopefully we can help out with the new generation there. So that's, I think it's a good segue. I want to briefly just touch on your furniture practice before we go. So, and you know, it's related because I believe your furniture is all like made from reused materials, and it all has a bit of a sense of history about it. Tell me more about you know, how you feel like these materials are carrying stories in them.
Yeah, so I have a couple of, I mean, it's funny, I'm looking at this one right here. This is the first of this particular chair that I made. All of this furniture that's in my house that I keep, that I don't sell, is made from essentially scraps. And then of course, if a client wants to buy the furniture, I go select woods and things like that, because usually I don't just have it laying around. Yeah, and then there's a bench over there as well that was made from really kindly donated scraps from local carpenter. So you know, so I think thinking that way and thinking about how I can make furniture with what I have is definitely helpful. And then the goal for me in the end is pieces that are simple as they can be, while also being expressive. And I think that there's a line, and I think, and maybe in some ways I want to start being less simple and more expressive, but then I always end up paring things back as well. So you know, and then, you know, in that also being useful, you know, this chair is useful for one thing and maybe not for another. This is not a lounge chair. It's a sitting upright chair for a short amount of time. It's not meant to be sat in for a long period of time, hence why it's at my dining table. And then also thinking about the structure, how this thing is held together. You know, I wanted particularly this series to be as I guess light feeling as possible. So, you know, having the metal legs that and this metal support here that that essentially span a long distance, but then need something to keep it from just snapping. So by putting in this, there you go, for the YouTube comments, this structure underneath, and essentially it's kind of making it appear that the seat is floating, but it's also giving some extra depth for that leg to be embedded into. And so, I mean, thinking both how the practical can be supported by what I consider beautiful, and then vice versa, how the beauty can make the thing actually work. So that's kind of where I go with my furniture. I don't know if that answered your question though.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, are there any like design ideas you come up with in your furniture that you've been inspired to scale up into a building?
I don't know. I think in a way, the way that I approach furniture is the way I want to approach buildings. The thing with buildings are actually, I had a studio in grad school that kind of was treating architecture space as giant cabinets in a way, and buildings in a way are just cabinets that people live in. Yeah. So I do try and apply these principles. It's like, well, buildings have to have structure. Buildings have to have, you know, mechanical systems and plumbing and electrical, and they have to have doors and windows. They have to have all of these things. But how does each of these things that have a function, just like the leg on this chair, how are they incorporated in such a way that there's a simple elegance to it? You know, and I think I want to chase that elegance. The salon is a really good example of this. You know, Seth and I really wanted that space to have that quality, right? That quality of feeling like you're in heaven, I guess. And in order to do that, we really don't want to see air supply ducts. And we don't want to necessarily see where the light is coming from. We want to see light. You know, I'm talking about artificial light, but I don't necessarily want to see the source of that light all the time, right? So in that project, there's few lights that we had to have, down lights that, yeah, sure, you can see them, but it was like, okay, we have to get the down lights that have the trimless, right? And then the way that the recess works around the ceiling, it makes it so you don't see where that continuous light at the ceiling is coming from. And embedded in that recess, right, there's a big cove that goes around the entire perimeter, right? And in that cove, that's where the AC is. So when you're sitting in your salon chair looking up at that ceiling, you cannot see the thing that's blowing the cool air down in the summer and the hot air down in the winter. And actually, that building has radiant heat as well, which will hopefully limit or eliminate the need for the heating in the winter. But all of that's to say, it's like, yeah, I think the principles, in an abstract way, the principles that I apply to my furniture design is applied to the architecture.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can see that. All right, so just to wrap up, I mean, what are you looking forward to in the next 5-10 years? What does practicing forward mean for you in terms of your architecture, design, and teaching practices?
I think constantly being critical of the time that we're in and the things that are happening on like a social scale is important. Right now, I can't go a day, maybe several hours without hearing the word AI. And this is a big thing. I mean, students have to know how to use AI.
Yeah.
But also students need to not lean on AI to do their work for them for a number of reasons. And I think in the same way, and AI is just an example, parametrics could be another example, right? So it's like approaching the new tools critically and using them as tools as we go forward. For example, the work that you do with the scanning, it's like so useful, right? It makes it so that our job of drafting is more precise and there's fewer questions raised in that process of like existing conditions and then going forward into the design of existing spaces, right?
All the coordination, all the, working with multiple vendors, all that kind of stuff.
So I think in that, as a tool takes the things off our plate that we may not want on our plate, we still need to be connected with reality, right? Going to spaces, I think, is always important. The projects I've worked on where I haven't been able to go to the site, I always feel something lacking. So architecture is physical and being in space is important. So, use the tools and exist in the physical world. I think that's what I wanted, right? Is just to, that's, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Well, it's, more and more incredible possibilities are happening. I think that, to me, I think that the next phase is really all about adaptive reuse and actually having these better tools to actually be able to, in some ways, working with existing buildings is much more difficult than building something from scratch. So I feel like the tools are really catching up so that we can start doing a lot of the sophisticated stuff that people are doing in new builds with existing buildings, really making old buildings into smart buildings. And, to me, I see hopefully a lot of these tools are just going to really empower us to do more amazing adaptive reuse projects like this Fawn and Fox thing, just creating a whole new typology here for how we live in these cities. And so, well, thank you so much, Adam. So I'm going to just plug you one more time. It's the firm is called Ark and Type. It's arch-type.com. Please check out the amazing work coming out of there. Also some really great ideas and essays and writing there. And then Adam's furniture practice is called McCullough Design, and it's mccdesign-.space. Go check out some of this work we were talking about with some of these salvaged furniture items. So, and then once again, he's a professor at University of Buffalo, and looking forward to catching up with you, Adam, face to face. Have some chicken wings and maybe a beef on weck and some sponge candy, and have a great. I'll definitely look you up next time I'm in Buffalo.
Sounds good. All right. Well, take it easy. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. It's great to talk to you, and looking forward to catching up with you soon. Thanks for all the great work you're doing, Adam. Okay,
Thanks.
cheers.
All
right, take care.